The Villisca Axe Murders, a true horror story. This is a true story of one of America's most chilling mysteries. Picture Villisca, Iowa, on a quiet June evening in 1912. Lanterns glowing softly in front yards, cicadas buzzing in the humid air, and families settling down behind lace curtains. It seems like any small Midwestern town until you learn what happened here. On that fateful night, an unknown intruder crept through the darkness with an axe in hand and shattered the peace forever. 8 voices, 6 children among them, were silenced before midnight. To this day, locals whisper of a restless spirit behind shuttered windows, and daring visitors report cold spots, footsteps on creaking floors, and fleeting glimpses of a shadowy figure. This real story has never been solved, and the Villisca Axe Murder House still stands, guarding its secrets. Now, lean in close and let your pulse quicken. Together, we'll walk those creaking floorboards, hear the soft thud of the killer's boots, and feel the weight of a horror that refuses to be forgotten. Welcome to the true story of the Villisca Axe Murders. Chapter 1. Shadows over Swede Street, June 9th, 1912. The setting sun painted the sky in dusky pinks as children played tag. On Swede Street, in the Moore home, Josiah and Sarah Moore tidied supper dishes while their children, Ina, Herman, Catherine, and little Paul, laughed in the parlor. Across the lawn, the Stillinger family enjoyed evening songs around a flickering lantern. It was the kind of summer night you'd call perfect, warm, gentle, and untroubled. Yet beneath the calm, something watched. A lone figure lingered at the edge of the street, axe handle wrapped in cloth, eyes cold as the approaching twilight. No neighbor saw the silent silhouette. No dog barked. Only the wind whispered through the elm trees, carrying a promise of the nightmare to come. When the barn cat scurried indoors and the church bell tolled 9, doors clicked shut and latches clicked into place. But the watcher remained, waiting for the hour when innocence would meet unspeakable terror. The Moore children's laughter faded as Josiah extinguished the last lantern. Upstairs, Ina clutched her rag doll beneath the quilt, eyes wide as her brother Arthur whispered a final bedtime prayer. Down the street, the Stillinger children yawned in unison, their mother's gentle voice calling them to wash faces and tuck in. Outside, the figure moved with patient intent. The temperature seemed to drop a full 10 degrees along the walkway, leading to the Moore porch. A soft breeze carried the scent of lilacs and something metallic, an imperceptible promise that innocence would soon shatter. In the dim glow of the moon, axe blade wrapped and hidden, the intruder paused at the window, breathing slowly to steady, pounding heart. Inside the Moore home, Sarah Moore smoothed back Catherine's hair, humming an old hymn. Herman drifted asleep to the rhythm of his mother's voice. In the next room, little Paul's soft snore was the only sound above the distant call of an owl. Every door was locked, every window latched tight, but from beyond those walls, the silent observer watched and waited, calculating each step. A distant train whistle broke the hush, reminding the small town that life continued on its predictable path. But not here, not tonight, not in the homes where dreams would never return. A single shadow crossed the threshold, and the world tilted on the edge of a nightmare. With deliberate calm, the intruder stepped into the dim foyer. The floorboards creaked beneath heavy boots, a sound swallowed by the thick quilted walls. Upstairs, the Moore family lay in fragile slumber, unaware that horror had crossed their doorstep. In the parlor, Sarah Moore stirred, sensing a presence in the shadows. She rose with soft caution, heart fluttering like a frightened bird. Candlelight wavered as she reached for the lamp, her fingertips brushing the polished brass. Before it could be lit, a muffled thud echoed from the hallway. Josiah's brow furrowed as he emerged from the study, Bible in hand. "Sarah?" he whispered, voice taut with concern. She took a step back, clutching the lampstand as though it were a shield. The air quivered between them, pregnant with dread. Down the corridor, a low groan came from the children's room. Catherine rolled onto her side, mouth opening in a silent cry. Herman blinked awake, eyes wide in confusion. In a heartbeat, Josiah crossed the threshold, finding the door ajar and a dark figure beyond. A swing of glinting steel. A scream cut the stillness. Sarah's scream echoed through the hallway as the axe found flesh. Josiah lunged forward, but the intruder's blade came down again. The lamp crashed to the floor, its glass shards scattering like frozen tears. Upstairs, the children awoke to terror. Arthur's muffled cry, Catherine's terrified sobs, and the unholy rhythm of steel striking bone. In a desperate bid, Sarah threw her weight against the figure, sending axe and attacker sprawling. Blood pooled in dark rivulets across the wooden planks. Josiah slammed the front door shut, but the killer only grunted, rising with unnatural speed. With cold precision, he turned, meeting Josiah's horrified gaze for a single heartbeat. Then he vanished into the night, leaving the Moore home bathed in moonlight and stained in crimson. Sarah collapsed to her knees, covering her mouth to stifle a wail. Above them, the children huddled in broken sleep, innocent faces streaked with tears. By the time dawn's pale light crept through the curtains, the Moore home felt hollow, and by eerie stillness where once laughter lived. Sarah pressed a trembling hand to her mouth as Josiah moved room to room, counting silent figures. 4 lay broken across the floor, and 2 more in the next chamber. Little Paul's quilt was soaked in red. Outside, early risers paused at their porch steps, sensing that something was wrong but unable to name it. A distant rooster crowed, as if mocking the unnatural quiet. Sheriff Ross Bell arrived on horseback, spurs clicking against the wooden boards. He leapt to the ground, eyes wide at the sight before him. Murders were rare in this peaceful town. Crimes usually reserved for headline newspapers, not sweet Villisca. The Stillingers next door stirred, drawn by commotion. Mary Stillinger opened her window and gasped, hand fluttering over her heart. Her children peeked from behind curtains, faces pale as ghosts. Bell blocked the doorway, ushering neighbors back. In whispered hushes, people exchanged fearful glances. No one had seen an intruder. No cry of alarm had pierced the night. Only the rattling of chains on the front door signified that evil had walked among them. Settlers gathered on the front lawn, clustering like frightened sheep. Bell knelt beside a small knife fragment, glinting on the porch. He pocketed it, brow furrowed, knowing this was no random burglary gone wrong. This was something far darker. Sheriff Bell's calm demeanor cracked as he surveyed the scene. He rose slowly, addressing the gathering crowd in a measured voice. "This is no accident," he declared, eyes scanning the pale faces in the dawn light. "This is murder." Neighbors exchanged stunned silence. Mrs. Stillinger wrapped her shawl tighter, whispering a prayer under her breath. Children peered from behind curtains, clutching blankets as though they offered protection. The true story of Villisca had begun to unravel, and fear seeped into every corner of the town. Inside the Moore parlor, Bell examined the weapon fragment and footprint impressions in the spilled blood. He noted the killer's care to avoid dragging. The blade, a sign of both brutality and control. Outside, deputies moved swiftly, sealing off Swede Street and questioning anyone who had been near after dark. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some claimed they saw a minister on horseback earlier that evening. Others swore a drifter with clouded eyes lingered by the railroad crossing. Gossip mingled with terror, and as midday sun climbed high, the hush of dawn was replaced by hushed speculation. Yet despite exhaustive interviews and the gathering of Evidence: no suspect was ever arrested. The killer vanished as silently as he came, leaving behind only questions and the lingering echo of an axe's swing. The Moore and Stillinger families' graves became monuments to a crime that would remain unsolved. One of America's grimiest true stories. Chapter 2. Midnight Bloodshed. The clock on the mantelpiece chimed 12 times, each toll resonating through Villisca's silent streets like a death knell. In the Moore household, the moonlight poured through shattered windows, illuminating overturned chairs and blood-stained quilts. Upstairs, the Stillinger home lay undisturbed, its inhabitants blissfully unaware of the carnage that had unfolded. Next door, within the Stillingers' parlor, a grandfather clock ticked steadily, marking the rhythm of a peaceful night. Catherine Stillinger sat reading by lantern light, her gaze drifting occasionally to the window. The breeze carried distant echoes, an owl's hoot, the rustle of leaves, but nothing more sinister. Suddenly, a low thud reverberated through the floorboards. Catherine paused, heart fluttering. Another thud, closer this time, like a heavy boot striking wood. She rose, setting the book aside, and tiptoed toward the hallway. Her lantern cast elongated shadows on the walls. The air felt charged, as though an unseen presence lurked just beyond the glow. In the adjoining room, Herman and Valentine slept soundly. Their steady breathing was a stark contrast to Catherine's quickened pulse. She reached the bedroom door and placed a trembling hand on the knob when a sudden crash of glass shattered the night stillness. The lantern fell from her grasp, its light snuffed out. For a heartbeat, there was only darkness. Then, the familiar shape of the axe's silhouette flashed before her eyes. Panic surged as she stumbled back, tripping over the rug and tumbling to the floor. A guttural growl filled the corridor as the intruder emerged from the shadows. His coat glinted in the moonlight, the axe's blade slick with fresh blood. Catherine scrambled upright, lips moving in silent prayer. But the killer moved with inhuman speed, raising his weapon high. The intruder's axe descended in a blurring arc. Catherine's scream was swallowed by the night as he struck the first blow. Herman woke with a start, eyes glazed with sleep, only to see his sister's silhouette framed in terror. Valentine bolted upright, heart pounding. Mary Stillinger, roused by the commotion, raced down the stairs with lantern aloft. She reached the top step as the killer turned, lantern light glinting off the blade. With a desperate cry, she thrust her body forward, blocking Catherine's path. The axe met wood and marrow. Mary's arms split beneath the force. She collapsed backward, lantern rolling across the floor and casting frantic shadows on the walls. The intruder's breathing was heavy, measured, an ominous rhythm that matched her racing pulse. From the floor below, J.B. Stillinger thundered up the stairs, shotgun in trembling hands. He fired blindly. The gun's roar cracked through the hall, sending the killer reeling. But as smoke curled in the air, the figure regained composure and fled, axe raised once more. J.B. gave chase into the moonlit yard, shotgun at his hip. Neighbors, drawn by the gunshot, stumbled from their homes, lanterns bobbing like fireflies. They watched in horror as the killer vanished into the cornfields, leaving behind only splintered boards and shattered lives. Blood and tears mingled under the pale moon. Catherine cradled Mary's head, sobbing as Herman and Valentine wept by her side. The true story of that night was etched into their souls. In the aftermath of the chaos, Catherine's trembling hands closed around Mary's ashen face. Herman and Valentine huddled close, their breaths shallow and quick. Downstairs, distant cries and hurried footsteps told of neighbors rushing toward the Stillinger home. But within those walls, time slowed to a torturous crawl. Mary's whispered prayers hung in the air as Catherine flipped the lantern upright, its dim glow revealing the jagged splinters in the doorframe. Herman's tears glistened on his cheeks, Valentine, pale and wide-eyed, brushed shaking fingers across the blood-streaked carpet. Outside, Sheriff Bell and deputies arrived, lanterns bobbing and horses stamping impatiently. Bell pushed past onlookers and hurried up the steps. His voice was grave as he assessed the wounded. "Get a doctor, quickly," he ordered, glancing toward the dark cornfields where footprints trailed off into the stalks. As a local physician arrived, Catherine guided Mary to a chair. The doctor's hands moved quickly, binding the torn flesh. In the corner, the axe lay discarded, its blade still slick. Bell knelt beside it, flashlight revealing a single fingerprint pressed into the blood. He bagged the evidence, eyes grim. The families gathered in candlelit kitchens, hands clasped in silent solidarity. Across Swede Street, the Moore home stood empty, its horrors already etched into history. And in that unity born of tragedy, the town realized the true story of that night would bind them forever. As the first light of dawn broke, deputies fanned. Out across the cornfields, lanterns bobbing among the stalks like lost souls. Footprints traced a winding path to the edge of town before vanishing altogether. Sheriff Bell stood at the threshold of the Stillinger home, shoulders heavy with exhaustion and sorrow. Inside, neighbors gathered in hushed prayer, offering comfort to the grieving family. Catherine held Mary's hand, her small frame trembling, while Herman and Valentine clung to each other, eyes hollow with fear. In the corner, the lantern's glow illuminated the deep gouges in the doorframe, a silent testament to the violence that had invaded their sanctuary. Bell addressed the crowd, voice unwavering despite the toll on his spirit. "We will not rest until this killer is found," he promised. Yet in the faces around him, hope flickered thin. The true story of Villisca's nightmare had only just begun, and already seemed destined to slip through the cracks of justice. Behind closed doors, families mourned and recounted the terror. Across town, the Moore and Stillinger homes bore identical scars, broken locks, splintered wood, and the haunting stain of blood. Villisca's streets felt smaller now, each shadow a reminder of the midnight massacre. In the stillness, a single raven perched on a fence post, its cry echoing through the empty fields. It watched as the town prepared for funerals, and as whispers of vengeance turned to whispers of doubt. The killer remained out there, silent, unseen, untouched by fear. Chapter 3. Discovery at Dawn. Morning light crept across Swede Street, painting the murder houses in a cold, unforgiving glow. News of the true story had spread like wildfire. Neighbors and strangers alike gathered in tight clusters, voices hushed with dread. Sheriff Bell, exhausted but determined, stepped onto the Moore porch and signaled for silence. Inside, Josiah knelt beside the last of his children, cradling her lifeless form. Sarah stood by the hearth, eyes hollow, clutching the rag doll that had been Ina's closest friend. Each breath felt impossible as the reality of the massacre settled in. 14 bodies lay across 2 homes, innocent lives stolen by an unseen butcher. Outside, the Stillinger family emerged from their home on stretchers and in tears. Mary's arm was strapped, her face pale but alive. Catherine, Herman, and Valentine trembled in Josephine's arms, their faces etched with a terror that would never leave. Bell raised a trembling hand. "I need every able-bodied man to line up," he ordered gently. "We're going into every house, every barn, every shed, no stone unturned. This killer will not escape justice." Men fanned out, entering homes to search for clues. In one cupboard, a blood-splattered piece of cloth was found. In a nearby barn, a single muddy bootprint marked the floor. Every discovery was catalogued, photographed, bagged and filed in the sheriff's ledger. The true story of Villisca was captured in stark detail: photographs of shattered windows, maps of footprint trails, and letters from grieving friends. In the town's general store, patrons paused to read the bulletin board plastered with notices, missing persons, reward offers, and funeral announcements. As the sun rose higher, the makeshift morgue was set up in the church basement. Families gathered in silent prayer while physicians and coroners worked to confirm identities. The Reverend Horton led a somber service, voice trembling. "We mourn the loss of these souls, and we vow to remember their names. This tragedy shall not be forgotten." Across town, telegrams were sent to state authorities, and reporters descended upon Villisca in search of the real story. Cameras clicked relentlessly, capturing grief-stricken faces and the gaping wounds of 2 shattered homes. The headlines would read, "Villisca Axe Murder, 8 slain in Midwestern horror." Deputies combed the town's outskirts as voicemail rang in the sheriff's office. Calls from distant relatives, reporters hungry for the true story, and even a shaken minister requesting a meeting. Inside the church basement, the makeshift morgue bustled. Icy sheets lifted to reveal each victim, and names were read aloud with trembling clarity. Sarah Moore's tears fell onto the polished wooden pews as she listened, barely able to utter the names of her children. In the general store, locals huddled over a single newspaper, headlined, "True Story, Villisca's Axe Murders Haunt Small Town." Cries of disbelief and horror mingled with speculation. Whispers of a mysterious stranger, seen near the train depot, passed from lip to lip. Every rumor was catalogued in Bell's ledger, alongside the physical evidence: axe fragments, footprints, and a blood-stained handkerchief with the initials JS. By late afternoon, wagons rolled through the streets, carrying wooden coffins draped with white linens. Friends and neighbors lined the sidewalks in solemn procession. Reverend Horton led a eulogy beneath the church steeple. "Though darkness visited our homes, we cling to the light of God's promise." His words carried on the breeze, a gentle defiance against the true horror they had witnessed. Outside, reporters interviewed tearful relatives and town officials. One photograph captured Josiah Moore standing rigid beside Mary Stillinger, their faces etched by grief yet resolute. Bell mandated that every scrap of information, even the most trivial whispers, be followed up, in hopes that some clue might finally expose the killer who had slipped away into legend. As dusk fell, the town's vigilance remained unbroken. Deputies patrolled in pairs, lanterns held high, families barred their doors, praying the true story of that night would not repeat itself. But in the shadows, the walls of those homes still held secrets, and the echo of an axe's swing lingered, like a specter. As evening shadows lengthened, Sheriff Bell pored over the day's findings in his dimly lit office. He spread photographs across the desk, grim portraits of shattered doors and tiny footprints in clotted soil. A telegram arrived from the state capitol. A forensic expert would arrive within days. Bell allowed himself a thin smile. Hope in the true story flickered again. Meanwhile, at the church vault, local women laid flowers on makeshift mantles by each coffin. Soft hymns drifted through the air as mourners lit candles for Josiah's children and the Stillinger siblings. Reverend Horton's voice quivered. "These souls are bound by tragedy, but their memories will be our strength." In the Moore homestead, Sarah Moore sifted through her children's belongings, finding a blood-stained ribbon in Ina's hand. The simple keepsake became evidence, photographed and sealed. Across the street, Mary Stillinger rested in bed, haunted by nightmares of the axe's gleam. Catherine and Herman sat beside her, clutching her hand. Outside, townsfolk whispered of a sinister presence lingering in the cornfields. Some swore they heard distant cries when the wind blew. Others claimed lanterns bobbing in abandoned fields. Bell's deputies noted each account, But fear met fact, and ghost stories mingled with real leads. A battered journal surfaced in the general store, handwritten by an itinerant preacher passing through weeks before. Its pages hinted at clashes with townspeople and strange dreams of an axe-wielding figure. Bell seized the journal, dispatching it alongside other exhibits to the state expert. As night fell, Villisca's unease deepened. Families barred their windows and double-checked locks. Yet curiosity burned bright. Some even dared to tiptoe near the houses, flashlights in hand, seeking a glimpse of the notorious crime scenes. The true story of Villisca's darkest hours had captured hearts and imaginations far beyond Iowa. Chapter 9. 4. Suspects and Rumors. Days after the murders, whispers of suspects swirled through Villisca like a chilling breeze. Sheriff Bell's office brimmed with names, some plausible, others born of superstition. First, there was Reverend George Kelly, a traveling preacher seen near town days before. Locals recalled heated arguments between Kelly and several parishioners over tithes. A witness claimed he arrived on horseback the evening of June 8th, his saddle oil-stained and smudged with what looked like fresh mud. Next, talk turned to William Blind Armstrong, a drifter known to wander the rail lines. Armstrong earned his moniker after losing sight in one eye during a saloon brawl months earlier. He'd been spotted near the train depot on June 9th, carrying a heavy satchel that some swore clanked like metal. When questioned, he denied ever entering Villisca, but his rough, mismatched boots matched the muddy prints found in the cornfields. Then came the theory of the jealous neighbor, Charles Lewis, a farmer whose land bordered the Moore property. Lewis and Josiah Moore quarreled over fence repairs weeks before, leaving scars of resentment. A tossed letter from Lewis, discovered in town, hinted at threats against those who cross me. Yet when deputies searched his barn, all he offered was a solid alibi. He'd been plowing fields at the time. In hushed tones, some even whispered of a shadowy axeman, a phantom that simply appeared on dark nights. Elm Street children dared each other to dash past the murder house at midnight, swearing they heard raspy breathing and the soft scrape of steel. These rumors, while sensational, blurred the lines between suspect and specter in a town desperate for answers. Sheriff Bell weighed each lead with caution, cataloging every statement in his ledger. For every plausible suspect, there were two more rumors: an out-of-town salesman with no alibi, a woman seen carrying a concealed bundle, a stranger who vanished from the saloon at dusk. As questions multiplied, certainty slipped away. Investigation led deputies to the train depot, where conductor Thomas Green recalled a passenger shifting nervously before boarding a westbound freight. Green described a tall man in a dark coat, face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. Minutes later, the man disembarked at the Moore crossing, footprints matching those found in both crime scenes. Meanwhile, rumors pinpointed Dr. William Kendrick, the town physician. Shortly after the murders, Kendrick purchased a new axe under the guise of clearing brush on his property. Neighbors noted he kept odd hours, often seen lingering outside the crime houses after midnight. When questioned, Kendrick's alibi wavered, but no physical evidence tied him to the killer's blade. At the local hotel, maid Sarah Whitlock swore she heard whispered vows beneath the Stillinger eaves, two voices speaking of a forbidden love and a vow to know them all in death. Whitlock's testimony suggested the possibility of a jealous, spurned lover, reviving suspicions around a traveling salesman who courted Mary Moore weeks prior. Further complicating matters, deputies discovered a bloodied glove behind the barn at the Moore property. The glove bore an embroidered emblem associated with the Masons, prompting inquiries into lodge member records. Every handshake and secret greeting fueled gossip. Could a respected mason be capable of such brutality? As suspicion fractured the community, friendships frayed. Townsfolk eyed one another with mistrust, and every traveler became a potential suspect. The true story of the Villisca Axe Murders grew darker with each whispered rumor, each unverified claim. Whispers of a possible copycat killer arose when another Iowa town reported an axe murder eerily similar to Villisca's just nights later. Sheriff Bell dispatched deputies to Greene County to interview witnesses. Some swore the assailant matched the description of the Villisca suspect: tall, hat brim low, coat stained with mud. Back in Villisca, the Masonic Lodge was called to order for an emergency hearing. Members cloaked in solemn robes offered statements. One member, Thomas Gregory, admitted lending his work gloves to a friend, but denied any knowledge of bloodstains. Others claimed lodge meetings had been unusually tense that spring, further fueling speculation of a secret rift. Meanwhile, a breakthrough arrived when a traveling salesman, Edgar Marshall, came forward. He confessed that a cloaked figure sold him an old axe near the railroad crossing days before. Marshall described the man's voice as cold and emotionless, promising a clean start. Deputies tracked down the transaction site, uncovering a muddy footprint near the tracks. Despite these leads, every suspect had a plausible excuse and every rumor lacked proof. The townsfolk held their breath, trapped between terror and frustration. As the true story grew muddled with speculation, one chilling fact remained. The killer had slipped through their grasp, blending back into shadows. Chapter 5. Ghosts in the cornfields. Under a pale harvest moon, the cornfields stood like towers of silent sentinels, a sea of stalks swaying in the night breeze. Locals dared not tread these fields after dusk, saying the rows themselves seemed to shift, guiding unwelcome souls deeper into darkness. It was here that thrill-seekers whispered of half-glimpsed figures drifting among the cornstalks, and where the echo of an axe's thud haunted the hush. On the anniversary of the murders, a group of curious townsfolk gathered at Swede Street's edge, lanterns held high. Among them was Clara Moore, Josiah's niece, determined to confront the legacy of fear. As they stepped between the stalks, the air turned cold, breaths blooming in misty clouds. Each crunch of dry leaves beneath their boots sounded like a heartbeat, reminding them their courage was thin. Deeper in, a sudden rustle froze the group. Lanterns swung wildly, casting fleeting shadows that danced like specters. A low moan drifted on the wind, as if the souls of the slain whispered through the blades. Clara's lantern light wavered, revealing what looked like footprints, small, childlike prints leading away from the field's center. A scream pierced the night when young Tommy Whitaker vanished from the line, swallowed by the corn's dark embrace. The lanterns swung around, revealing empty space and the quickening panic of the searchers. They called his name, voices cracking with fear, but the only reply was the rustle of stalks and the distant hoot of an owl. When Tommy stumbled back, eyes wide, breath ragged, he spoke of a pale face peering between the leaves. His voice trembled. She called my name, like she remembered me. The group huddled close, lanterns forming a fragile circle of light. That night, the cornfields claimed a new tale, the echo of grieving parents among the harvest rows and the promise that the restless spirits of the Villisca Axe Murders refused to remain buried. Dawn's light filtered through the stalks, revealing flattened patches of earth where footsteps had pressed. The group regrouped at the field's edge, torches still flickering. Clara pressed forward, drawn by an unspoken compulsion, the scent of damp soil and something faintly floral guiding her deeper. Ahead, they found a small clearing ringed by cornstalks, footprints encircling a patch of disturbed earth. In the center lay a single teddy bear, its button eye missing and its fur matted with reddish soil. A chill ran through the searchers as whispers spread. This was one of the Moore children's bears. Mary. Stillinger knelt beside the toy, trembling. "Not again," she whispered, voice cracking. Catherine's hand flew to her mouth as memories of that night clawed back. The field felt alive with memory, each rustle a ghostly echo of children's laughter now lost. Suddenly, a distant sob reached their ears. Herman staggered into view, eyes red, clutching a torn piece of quilt. He collapsed beside the bear, shaking. "She's here," he gasped. "Ina, she's here." Clara set her jaw, lifting the quilt fragment. It fluttered in the breeze like a pale flag against the tall stalks. A soft sobbing drifted through the rows, unreal, heart-wrenching. No rational mind could mistake it for wind. The group clustered, tightly, lantern light dancing on anxious faces. A figure emerged between the cornstalks, pale, ethereal, draped in fragments of white cloth. The shape drifted forward, revealing a child's face streaked with tears and eyes wide with sorrow. For a moment, time stood still. Then the spectre vanished, melting into the stalks as though it had never existed. A profound silence followed, broken only by Herman's whispered plea, "Don't leave me." The searchers fled the field, hearts pounding. Behind them, the corn stood motionless, its secrets reclaimed once more by the gloom. When the searchers finally halted at the edge of the field, breathless and shaken, Clara pleaded for calm. She knelt beside the flattened earth where the bear lay, lifting it gently. Its single button eye caught the first rays of sunrise, glinting with an otherworldly sorrow. "Listen," she whispered, head tilted toward the stalks. For a moment, all was silent. Then, a faint whisper drifted on the breeze. "Hide me, help me." The words were soft, childlike, yet impossibly hollow. Herman clutched Clara's skirt. "It's her," he breathed. "Ina." A flutter of movement stirred the shadows at the field's entrance. A pale gown floated toward them, as though carried by an invisible hand. The spectre's eyes, once tear-streaked, now bore into Clara's soul with mute desperation. Mary stepped forward, voice trembling. "What do you need?" she asked, tears in her own eyes. The spirit paused, gaze shifting toward the Moore house silhouette on the horizon. With a gust of wind, the ghostly girl reached out, pointing back into the darkness of the corn rows. Clara understood. They must follow where she could not. Gathering their courage, the group pressed deeper into the towering stalks, guided by the fading apparition and the silent plea for aid. Every rustle seemed alive, every shadow pregnant with longing. At the heart of the field, they found it. A buried locket entwined in roots, its clasp broken and engraved with the initials I.M. Mary knelt and pried it free, revealing a tiny portrait of a smiling girl in a white dress. Tears flooded Clara's cheeks as she held the locket aloft. "This is yours," she murmured to the spectre. For an instant, the ghost's form softened, a gentle nod shimmering in the dawn light. Then, as quickly as she appeared, the spirit dissolved into motes of light, drifting upward like embers on a breeze. The whisper faded into silence. The group stood in awe, hearts heavy yet uplifted by the sense that a lost soul had been found at last. By midday, word of the night's encounter spread through Villisca like wildfire. Families gathered on porches, clutching the locket as both talisman and testament to the restless spirit. Clara returned to the Moore house, placing the locket on the mantel above the hearth. Its presence seemed to lift a weight of sorrow, if only for a moment. Mary, Catherine, and Herman stood beside her, eyes misty yet hopeful. The air in the room felt different, lighter, as though a gentle breath had passed through. Outside, the cornfields lay silent, their stalks swaying in the breeze as if bidding farewell to a long-lost child. That evening, the town held a small gathering in the Stillinger barn. Lanterns were lit, and neighbors offered prayers for the victims and gratitude for the spirit's brief visitation. Reverend Horton spoke softly. "Though our hearts bear scars, tonight we have seen grace. Ina's memory remains with us, reminding us to cherish every life." As the crowd dispersed under starlit skies, Clara lingered at the barn door. In the stillness, she heard a faint whisper, so soft it might have been the wind. "Thank you," she smiled through tears, pressing a finger to her lips. Whether ghost or memory, the voice lingered in her heart. Chapter 6. Haunting Echoes. In the years since the true story of the Villisca Axe Murders captured national attention, the Axe Murder house became a pilgrimage site for paranormal investigators. Thick velvet ropes once lined the sidewalk. Now they lie forgotten as the house itself succumbed to time and rumor. Visitors tread carefully through splintered doorways, cameras rolling, EMF meters buzzing with restless energy. On a crisp autumn evening, a team of 3, divided by skepticism and hope, crossed the threshold. Led by Mia Hart, a seasoned investigator who had dedicated her career to exposing the truth behind America's most haunting legends, the group carried only handheld recorders, flashlights, and a deep resolve to uncover lingering echoes of that fateful night. Their footsteps stirred decades-old dust. In the parlor, peeling wallpaper revealed ghastly stains that no renovation could erase. Hart paused, resting her hand on a gouge in the mantel, an axe strike preserved in wood grain. "This mark," she whispered, "connects us to the victims. It's a true story etched in history." As they moved from room to room, the air grew inexplicably cold. Cameras recorded misty breath and sudden drops in temperature. In the children's bedroom, they found a rag doll propped against the wall, fashioned in the likeness of one belonging to Ina Moore. Its glass eye glinted in the torchlight, a jarring reminder that some memories refuse to fade. Hart's assistant, Derek, aimed his camera at the attic stairway. "Did you hear that?" he asked, voice tense. A distant creak echoed overhead, as though someone or something still roamed the halls. The group exchanged uneasy glances, evidence of restless spirits. Before they could ascend, the recorder captured a whisper, "Help me." The words were faint, but unmistakable. Hart's heart pounded as she replayed the playback. "These voices," she said, "are the echoes of true terror. They demand to be heard." Heartbeats thundered in Mia's ears as the group ascended the narrow attic stairs, each step groaning beneath their weight. The beam of Hart's flashlight pierced the gloom, revealing dusty trunks and scattered remnants of the past. In a far corner, Derek discovered a child's toy chest, its lid slightly ajar, as though waiting for a small hand to open it. He pried it open, and the air rushed out. A sudden gust that extinguished his flashlight. Panic flickered across the team's faces. In the dim glow of the backup lantern, Mia spotted something inside. A blood-stained cedar hairbrush, bristles matted together. A whisper crackled through their recorder. "Please." The voice was frail, yet insistent. Mia pressed, rewind, and played the clip again. This time, a second voice joined in. "Save us." Bold with purpose, Hart swept her recorder through the room, capturing every creak and sigh. Beneath their feet, floorboards trembled, and a cold pressure pressed against their backs. The toy chest rattled, as if moved by unseen hands. Jake, the tech specialist, raised his EMF meter. The needle spiked wildly, then plunged to 0. "Energy is off the charts," he murmured. "But something's blocking the signal beyond this room." As they reached the attic window, Hart shone the lantern outward. Moonlight revealed claw-like scratches on the sill, fresh marks gouged into rotting wood. She knelt to examine them, tracing the grooves with gloved fingertips. "These weren't made by a tool," she whispered. "They echo the killer's fury." In that moment, a disembodied laugh echoed through the rafters, childlike and hollow. The team froze, eyes widening. The recorder's playback captured it again, a chilling reminder that the house itself remembered. The group descended softly from the attic, each floorboard groan echoing in the stillness. Hart led them through the dim hallway toward the cellar. Door. Below, the air was thick and cold, carrying the scent of mold and stale memories. With a deep breath, Mia illuminated the steps with her flashlight and stepped down into the darkness. In the cellar's cavernous expanse, old tools lay strewn. On workbenches and broken chairs stood against crumbling stone walls. Derek set up his digital recorder on a rusted table, fingers trembling as he pressed the button. "Is anyone here with us?" he called out, voice wavering. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then the recorder crackled with static, and a soft, childlike giggle filled the room. Hart's breath caught in her throat as she replayed the clip. The giggle grew louder, and a second voice, older, raspy, whispered, "Away, go away." Jake lifted his EMF meter, needles spinning wildly before crashing to 0. "Energy readings are off the chart." "Then gone," he muttered. Mia shone her light toward the far corner where shadows clung to the walls. Shapes flickered at the edge of her vision, faces pressed against the stone, mouths open in silent screams. Suddenly, the cellar door slammed above them, plunging the space into near darkness. Their flashlights flickered, and beneath their feet, the floor vibrated with a rhythmic thumping, as though something paced unseen. Derek's recorder crackled. "Save us, please." Hart's voice shook as she whispered, "This is their
story, their haunting echo." She placed a protective hand on the recorder. The tapping grew louder, circling them until it stopped abruptly. In the silence that followed, a single tear-shaped droplet of water fell from the ceiling and landed
on the recorder, as if marking the end of the message. Back in the parlor, Mia, Hart, and her team reviewed hours of recordings. The voices in the attic and cellar were unmistakable, desperate pleas, childlike giggles, and mournful whispers. Each clip was time-stamped and catalogued, evidence of the house's restless past. Yet no amount of technology could explain the lingering sorrow in those rooms. As midnight approached, Hart led the group to the main entrance. They paused beneath the broken porch light, cameras and recorders still running. "Whatever happened here," Hart said softly, "left an indelible mark. This house remembers." A final sweep of the EMF meter registered a gentle hum, then faded to silence as they stepped away. Outside, the wind stirred the old oak leaves, carrying a distant echo of children's laughter. The team exchanged solemn nods, understanding that their investigation had provided only more questions. The Axe Murder house stood silent once more, its secrets locked behind boarded windows. Before departing, Hart placed a single white rose on the threshold, a tribute to the souls lost within. She whispered a vow that their true story would not be forgotten, that the voices captured on tape would carry their memory forward. The team climbed into their car, headlights piercing the darkness. As they drove away, the house receded into the shadows, but its presence lingered in their hearts and recordings. The haunting echoes of the Villisca Axe Murders would continue to call out to those brave enough to listen. Chapter 7. Uncovered Secrets. Evelyn Moore's heart pounded as she pushed open the heavy barn door. Moonlight filtered through broken slats, casting long, trembling shadows across the dusty floor. She knelt by the loose floorboard Jane Roberts had described, propping it up with trembling fingers. The scent of aged wood and damp straw rose in cool waves. Beneath the boards lay a small iron box, its surface mottled with rust and carved with the intertwined initials, J.R. Evelyn raised the lid, and inside rested a bundle of brittle papers tied with a faded ribbon, along with a tightly folded hand-drawn map. Her breath caught at the thought this was the first new evidence in over a century. Drawing a deep breath, she untied the ribbon and carefully unfolded the map. The inked lines revealed a network of hidden passages beneath the Moore and Stillinger properties, narrow, low-ceilinged tunnels that connected the two homes and led to a sealed chamber under the Moore porch. Jane's neat script annotated each turn, warning of prying eyes above and urging secrecy. Evelyn's hands trembled as she held the confession letter dated June 9, 1912. Jane wrote of her clandestine visits, slipping beneath the farmhouse at midnight, overhearing hushed conversations between Dr. William Kendrick and an unidentified stranger. She spoke of Kendrick's whispered promise, "Help me protect this family name, and no one will suspect a soul." Jane's ink-stained tears smudged the corners of her plea. A lump formed in Evelyn's throat. The respected physician, known for his charitable work and warmth, was painted here as conspirator, betrayer of trust and complicit in a slaughter that gasped through the years. Jane's final words trembled on the page. Silence cost 8 lives. Evelyn folded the letter, the weight of those words heavy in her hands. Guided by the map, Evelyn returned to the Moore porch at the stroke of midnight. Torch in hand, she pressed the hidden latch beneath the floorboards. The trapdoor creaked open, revealing a shadowed stair descending into cold, damp earth. She paused, lantern light illuminating a ring of engraved symbols, Jane's warning that the path was watched. Steeling herself, Evelyn climbed down into the narrow tunnel. The walls pressed close, dampness seeping through the sandstone. Her every step echoed softly in the hush. She followed Jane's annotations, left at a carved cross, right at a chipped stone, until she reached a stout, rusted chest bound in iron straps. Her heart hammered as she inserted Jane's key. The lock clicked, and the chest lid groaned open, revealing objects wrapped in oilcloth. She unwound the cloth to uncover Dr. Kendrick's monogrammed silk handkerchief, darkened with age and stains of dried blood. Next, a torn page from the itinerant preacher's journal, implicating Reverend George Kelly in threats of concealment. Finally, a sealed envelope addressed to Sheriff Bell himself. With shaking hands, Evelyn opened the envelope. Inside was Jane's final testimony. Dr. Kendrick orchestrated it all, promise of immunity for me in exchange for my silence. When I balked, he threatened the whole family. Reverend Kelly knew too much and was coerced into burying evidence. The real killer walked, free under my roof. I entrust this to you, Sheriff Bell, that justice may yet be served. Evelyn's lantern flickered as she absorbed the confession. The rot of betrayal ran deeper than any rumor. She pressed the handkerchief to her lips, whispering a vow to honor Jane's courage by unearthing the truth. Emerging from the tunnel, Evelyn stared at the silent house. The artifacts in her satchel burned with the weight of unresolved justice. The night air felt charged, as though relieved that its darkest secrets were finally revealed. She stepped across the threshold into the moonlit yard, resolved. The descendants of those who conspired would learn the full true story, and the victims' voices, long muffled, would at last be heard above the hush of history. Chapter 8. The Killer's Whisper. Moonlight streamed through the cracked windows, casting pale beams across the central hallway of the old Moore home. Evelyn Moore's lantern trembled in her grasp as she moved with deliberate silence, footsteps echoing softly on creaking floorboards. At this hour, the house lay cloaked in stillness, yet she felt its watchful presence, as if walls themselves held breath. She paused at the threshold of the children's room. The air felt electric, heavy with memories of laughter cut short. Evelyn swept her lantern beam across toys strewn atop dusty floorboards. An empty cradle bore the faint imprint of a child's form. In the corner, the rag doll she had once discovered lay propped against the wall, its button eye reflecting the flicker of flame. A distant whisper drifted down the hallway, soft, insistent. "You know the truth." Evelyn's heart thundered. She pivoted, lantern slicing through shadows, but saw nothing. Only the corridor stretched before her, doors hanging ajar like yawning mouths. Steeling herself, Evelyn advanced to the parlor. The fireplace, long cold, was littered with fragments of newspapers and letters, evidence she had collected over months of investigation. She knelt, sorting through the scraps until she found a half-burned envelope addressed in Jane Roberts's hand. Flames had licked its edges, obscuring the final lines. Evelyn extracted the surviving portion. "The killer's final mercy is silence. He watches from the shadows, his whisper the last mark upon memory." Her breath caught. The words implied, more than legend could reveal. The murderer had left a final clue, hidden in plain sight, and his whisper still lingered. As she rose, a low creak sounded above, footsteps on the upstairs boards. Evelyn's pulse quickened. Clutching her lantern, she mounted the staircase, each step a protest beneath her weight. At the top, she halted before the attic door, frozen by the certainty that she was no longer alone. Summoning courage, Evelyn pushed open the hatch. The attic groaned under the shift of air. Shadowed rafters stretched overhead, dust motes swirled in the lantern's glow. At the far end, she spied a narrow beam of moonlight illuminating a section of floor where the boards appeared newer, an unmistakable repair. She approached, kneeling beside the replaced planks. With gentle force, she pried one free, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a slender wooden box, carved with the same symbols she'd seen in Jane's tunnel. Evelyn lifted the lid. Within, nestled in velvet, was an antique locket engraved with the initials SM, a final testament to Sarah Moore's memory. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she opened it to reveal a miniature portrait of Sarah and Josiah, smiling beneath the summer sun, untouched by blood and betrayal. At that moment, the whisper returned, clear and resonant. "Remember me." The voice seemed to emanate from the locket itself, carrying the weight of a promise. Evelyn pressed, the charm to her heart, tears brimming. The killer's whisper was not a curse, but a plea to ensure that names and faces remained alive beyond the stain of tragedy. Outside, the wind rose, stirring the ancient oaks around the house. Evelyn climbed from the attic, locket clutched in hand. She paused at the open window, releasing the lantern's flame to the breeze. The ghostly glow vanished, leaving only starlight and the distant hush of Villisca's empty streets. Evelyn stepped back into the hallway, her resolve unshakable. She would carry the victims' voices forward, their stories unbroken by time. For in the killer's whisper lay the final truth. That memory is the truest justice, and silence the greatest crime.